Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tiffany Leon, and I am the Senior Manager for Training and Professional Programs at FAIR. And I'm delighted to be your moderator today for our discussion on college dining during COVID-19. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few things. Please note that for maintaining a quality recording, all attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, this is not going to stop you from joining in on the discussion today. Everyone should see a Zoom toolbar in black at the bottom of their screen. Specifically, in this toolbar, you will see a Q&A button. You can use this to communicate directly with me. Please let me know if you are having any technical difficulties. I will try my best to help. We've built in a lot of time at the end of the discussion for moderated questions. A special thank you to those that sent them in ahead of time, but feel free to send additional questions my way throughout the presentation, and if time permits at the end, I will pass them along to our panelists. As a reminder, this will be recorded and a copy will be sent out when it's available, probably next week. Today, we have an exciting webinar planned to discuss changes to campus dining in the wake of a global pandemic and what that means specifically for students with food allergies. Accommodating food allergies in a large-scale food operation can have its challenges, and with attention on minimizing the spread of the virus, this adds a whole new layer. To provide insight into what's coming down the pike in the fall, we have 5 panelists today from colleges and universities across the country. Let's do a quick roundtable introduction. So please give us your name, role at the university or food service provider, and 1 to 2 creative ways your school is going to balance traditional safety practices with the new COVID-related restrictions. And Terry, let's start with you.
Thanks, Tiffany. It's exciting to be here today and to communicate about what's going on out there in our world around food allergies. We, kind of got thrown into this last spring. It was a sudden occurrence, and we learned a lot from it. Both, the things that might be good for food allergic students, as well as the challenges. So I think we've been able to take those learnings and have a little bit of a break during the summer with smaller groups, or maybe some campuses shut down altogether. In order to kind of reformulate our plans. So my name is Terry Brownlee, and I am the Director of Nutrition and Wellness for Bon Appetit Management Company. We are a division, a sector of Compass Group, and so we do multiple colleges and universities across the country. I can't actually name all of them, but if anybody wants to email me, I'll be happy to let you know which ones your student is interested in. So for the fall, we have a lot of solutions on the table, but we are continuing to emphasize that one-on-one communication with students. I think there's an assumption that because of the pandemic that we're not going to be able to do that. And we do feel like that is still a very, very important piece of feeding our students safely, is helping them understand what might be very specific to one location, what is always there, and then also what we can do for them individually, as that will continue to be a big piece of the way that we serve our students. One of the things we learned from the spring overall is that menus needed to be simplified, not just for food allergic students, but across the board, because we needed to be able to get people through more quickly, more people, and let them space out and not end up, wandering and waiting in the cafes. And then one of the things that I'm really excited about is we've had a concept called Oasis, which is our concept that is made without the major 8 allergens. And we have simplified that concept for the fall and we're making it available to our campuses for implementation. And our focus will be on what we call single ingredient ingredients. So those foods that are naturally without allergens and that don't require a lot of humans to read package labels and make a determination at the account level. They'll be focusing in on fruits, vegetables, those basic foods are potatoes, beans, etc., that will allow them to make very simple, tasty meals for students, and reduce the risk of any issues that may come out of package label reading. So that's what we have on the table, and I'll stop there and let my colleagues chime in as well.
Yeah, that's great that for some schools that may have had minimal operations open over the summertime, it's almost seen as a practice run, right? To see kind of what works with smaller crowd size, and then you can, scale it when you have kids back on campus. So that's good. And I definitely think that there is merit in thinking about the foods that are naturally top 8 or 9 allergen free, such as the whole muscle proteins, fruits and vegetables, because then you can, almost guarantee that broccoli should be safe, right? and
absolutely
plain chicken should be good to go. So that's definitely good that that's definitely a good idea to kind of focus on some of that stuff. So that's awesome. Great. Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go around my panel. I don't know how everyone's panels are set up, but let's go over to Gina. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Gina Forster. I am the Assistant Director of Nutrition with Dining Services at Ohio State. So we are self-operated. I've actually been with the university now in this position for actually 7 years in 2 weeks. So I'm going into my 8th year.
Wow, congrats.
Yeah, thanks. It's gone very fast. We have done a lot, and just a couple of things that we have done specifically over the last few months with students. Generally this time over the summer, I'm meeting with students and parents one-on-one on campus, and taking them on little tours of the operations, introducing them to the managers and the chefs, so they have a familiar and friendly face to see when they go into the operation, and vice versa. It's good for the operations managers and chefs to get to know the students as well, the students who are going to have the allergies. But of course, we haven't been able to do that this year. So we're doing Zoom meetings. So we'll get the chef and the manager and me and the student, and a lot of times also the parents. And we just have a conversation, and they get to see each other and really meet each other via Zoom, which has been very helpful. And then I would say another big thing that we've done that we actually thankfully started over the spring semester in January. So we had about 2 months to try this out in practice. And that was, we've already used Grubhub in the past for ordering. I would say, and I don't know this for a fact, don't quote me on this, but I would say maybe about 60% of our items were already being ordered via Grubhub at Ohio State University, which is nice. But of course, now it's going to be closer to 100% via Grubhub. But what we did is I sort of realized that students were placing orders on Grubhub, which is our online mobile ordering app, and they would indicate they have an allergy or a unique dietary need. They would go to pick up their food, and there was really no way of knowing that their note was even seen and that the proper steps were taken. So I, of course, realized that that's probably a problem, and that's not good for the comfort level of the student. And so now what we've done, and we started again, that whenever there's a note about an allergy or an intolerance on Grubhub, if a student indicates they have an allergy or an intolerance, the operations are asked to, once they've completed the steps in making the meal allergen safe, and they've avoided cross contact, to put a purple sticker on the receipt. So that way, when the student comes to pick up their order, they'll know that their note was seen, and they'll feel confident that their food is safe. So I would say those are 2 big things that we've done over the past few months plus that hopefully are going to make students have a really good, extraordinary experience this fall and beyond on campus.
Yeah, so many things have been moved to Zoom. So it's nice that the meeting with the parents and the students and kind of the whole culinary team, that while we are separate, that it wasn't a barrier to communicate with the families. So that's great. And Grubhub, I'm familiar with Grubhub. We'll probably get into a little bit more about the app-based ordering services, but it is nice when the student picks up their food that they can know that their voice was heard, even if it's with a little purple sticker. So I'm sure they can appreciate that too. That's great. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Tina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody. My name is Tina Reddington, and I work for Sodexo. I am the National Manager of all things health, wellness, and nutrition, like most of the folks on the phone, for our university segment across the country, as well as our K through 12 segment. So I really get to experience a diverse group from all ages. And this year, because we have so many locations that are coming back to school in different models, whether it's hybrid, some are virtual, some are on campus, some are more relaxed than others. Depending on the style of service that the university wants to utilize, and some of them are fully served. So we have different models that we're coming back to school with, and we are operating our simple servings, allergen-free platform at an increased number of accounts this year because it's become so popular. And so we are rolling out new locations. We've worked with some of our vendors, as I'm sure people on the phone heard last spring. We had a rush at the grocery stores and there were food shortages, and some of our suppliers were telling us that they weren't going to be able to provide certain items. So we worked with our suppliers to ensure our supply line was free and clear. And then we revamped our menus to ensure that we could get all the food that we needed and we wouldn't be running out of anything. So we are running our full menu. In fact, very excited to announce that we have opened up our platform now to include a breakfast line, as well as additional vegan items, because our students told us they wanted more vegan. So we added more vegan entrees, as well as a whole dessert line. So we are pushing forward, and there are some, as I said, there's some locations that the pandemic has not affected as much as others. And those universities are coming back as business as usual. And then there's others where we're ramping up our quarantine and isolation buildings, and we also have multiple ordering platforms. So Sodexo has an ordering platform called Bite Plus. It is on your phone, and we have incorporated all of our retail as well as all of our dining to include our simple servings platform. So our students can just order it. They can have it delivered. They can pick it up remotely. There's going to be remote sites on campus. So we have multiple really creative opportunities so that you don't have to come into the dining hall if you don't want to. So that's my fun, exciting news.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, you mentioned that the simple servings was being implemented on more campuses. Was that pre-COVID anyway because of the increased demand for allergen-friendly meals, or is this as a result of COVID-19?
I think it's just we continued to serve over the summer, as a lot of campuses do, and some of our operators came back and said, hey, this was kind of in the works and we're going to keep going forward. And it's honestly a combination. Some are just saying, hey, we need to have this as a result of COVID, and so we're putting it in for both reasons. Additionally, some of those more restricted locations, we have some very, I think some of these were in some questions, but if it's not a served platform, some of the simple servings will be put into pre-packaged, pre-labeled containers that are sealed so that they are tamper resistant, and there's some comfort for the students to know that, they're sealed, they've got the label on them, and if it's been tampered with in any way, they'll be able to tell.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of food service operations are managed by parent companies such as Sodexo. Do you think that students can expect to see similar solutions from two schools managed by the same organization, as you said, with the simple servings being open in more accounts? Or do you think that this varies from provider to provider, school to school?
Well, the core is always the same. Simple servings platform is the same across, but there are obviously geographical differences, whether it's due to taste difference. I think everybody knows that each geography prefers different hot sauce, whether
Sure.
you're Tabasco or somebody else's. Yeah, so there are some differences with geography. There's also differences in the model that we return back to school. So like I said, some locations will have the same core menu, but served in containers, pre-packaged, and some will be full-on served stations. Our simple serving site platform is always served. It has its own dedicated server, station, etc. So, it kind of fell right in with COVID because, it's already served and it already has its own dedicated oven and platform and prep station. So it kind of was COVID ready, if you will.
And just a question from our audience, because you brought up vegan options, but Leslie asks, what have been the most successful top 9 vegan recipes? Top 9 free vegan recipes.
Well,
are they successful at all accounts, or is it more regional, as you suggest?
These are brand new, so we're rolling it out this year. So stay tuned and I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. All right. Look forward to hearing that. Okay. Thank you, Tina.
Sure.
All right, Jill, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, so I'm Jill Hamilton. I am a registered dietitian for Airmark. I'm based out of Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas, but I support about 35 other higher ed schools across Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So kind of been able to see quite a bit across the board and really work with different students in different regions, from your, your smaller junior colleges all the way to your big kind of BCS level schools, which has been great to see. I'm sure there's a lot of students on here who are going to both. So I've really tried to individualize what we're doing. So especially at your smaller schools, maybe you don't have quite as many students with dietary restrictions. So in that case, it's really kind of a text ahead system to make sure that their meals are ready when they get there, type of situation. Then at some of your larger schools, for instance, the one that I'm located at, we're able to have stations that have are rid of 7 of your top 8 allergens. So wheat, dairy, soy, egg, peanut, and tree nut. And so that just makes it a quick one-stop shop. You go into the dining hall, you grab your meal, you're out. We've also identified meals at each other dining location on campus. So that way you don't really have to think about it. You can say, hey, I'm here for the allergen meal, and you can just grab it and go. And then also having prepackaged items in convenience stores on campus kind of separated out. So that way you can kind of get those as well. So people don't have to think about it. There's just kind of, hey, here you go, get in, get out. So it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a good point. We haven't really touched on convenience stores on campus. Have you found that some of the items that you stock that are top 8 or 9 allergen free are also popular across campus?
Definitely for the grab and go items that we have kind of outside of our dining halls. So not necessarily the ones at the convenience stores, but the one outside the dining hall. Maybe it's a salad that's made without your top allergens that a lot of other people have really gone to. We'll find that in the dining halls as well. And then, once you get into some of the convenience, people will, not recognize items, like Enjoy Life, that a lot of people will use. So that's more where sometimes we'll promote it. So that way other people will buy into that way everybody is knows what it tastes like and it's accessible, or they've got a roommate with an allergy. And so they can, eat that in the room without having any sort of issue. So it's growing for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. We do have another question, and I know that Aramark has something similar to Simple Servings. I believe it's called True Balance. For stations that have, for schools that have specialty stations like Simple Servings or True Balance, or even if it has no specific name at all, but that's just where the allergen friendly meals are being prepared. Can you confirm that there will be other options for students with food allergies outside of those specialty stations?
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's what I try and do, like, especially at my home campus at SFA. Like, we have a lot of, we basically take surveys of students whenever they sign up for meal plans to see what our top allergens are going to be on campus. And then I work with the chef managers when we're writing the menus. So that way we have an option at every single station. So you don't have to go just to your True Balance station to find, maybe a allergen aware pizza, for instance. You can find, some of those options at some of the other stations or grill traditions, items like that. So try and especially for your schools that don't have a True Balance, that's what we try and write in and to kind of highlight. So that way, maybe the line's getting bad there, or, what really, say someone is only allergic to peanuts, they don't want to necessarily only have to go to a station that's rid of, your top 8, right? So
Exactly.
having those options around at the other places in the dining hall really helps.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why I was asking that question, because if a student has multiple food allergies, then those larger stations are excellent. But if they're really only avoiding one food, how can we ensure that there are safe allergen practices across campus, so that if an item is naturally milk-free, then a student with a milk allergy could still eat that item. So, and we'll get into some processes and procedures in a little bit, but we can wrap up with Laura. Last but not least, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Tiffany. I'm Laura Lapp. I lead the wellness and culinary teams for Chartwell's Higher Education. I'm a registered dietitian as my background. And as we started our response to COVID-19 and implementing some changes, I think the thing that stands out that might be just a little bit different than what some of my colleagues have already discussed is that we looked at all of our menus in terms of different tiers based on what was happening around the country. As Tina mentioned, there are some campuses that are in hotspots and they're responding to the pandemic a little bit differently. What we did was take a baseline approach to implement some changes across the board, regardless of what's happening within the local community. So just all of our campuses across the board, we're not doing self-service at any of our stations at all anymore. We went ahead and flipped everything over to serve stations, and then it backs up from that point to a very restrictive all delivery, all to go type of a model. So there are several different, fluid layers within there. But really just in terms of making sure that everyone across the board was safe, we felt it was necessary to take that step. And then also implementing some additional cleaning layers, which not only have the effect of assisting manage, COVID, but also help eliminate allergen cross-contamination and things of that nature. And not that we weren't always following very strict food handling and safe practices and cleaning in the back of the house, because we do have very detailed outlines. We've actually amped up that cleaning process so that every 30 minutes, we're cleaning all of our high contact surfaces, all of our food contact surfaces, and then organizing our teams in pods so that they're working together as a cohort, which is going to help us further minimize some of that viral risk. I think just in terms of allergens, that was one of our huge considerations for every single one of our different dining tiers. As a baseline, we have something very similar to the Simple Servings concept. It's called G8. It eliminates the 8 major allergens and gluten. Specialty recipes that have all been pre-approved by our campus dietitians or our dietetics leadership. Very similar to Terry's program. It's really focused on whole foods. We don't want to have to do a lot of tracking down of packaged food products and relying on manufacturers to let us know when there are updates and changes. So it's a very whole foods-based approach. I would say, I hesitate to even guess how many of our campuses actually have one of those stations, because we want to work one-on-one with those campuses specifically. We have very strict protocols around how they implement those stations, how they manage those stations. So to say that they're everywhere would be inaccurate, but what we do have everywhere is formal allergen training for all of our managers, all of our hourly associates. Hourly associates have to receive their allergen training twice a year, so in the fall and in the spring semester, and then all of our managers at least once a year. And that's standard across the board for everyone. And then again, just to piggyback on what Terry said, that one-on-one communication is super important, and that's not going to go away during this COVID environment. We really, I think now more than ever, need to have that access to students and be able to help them navigate what it is they need specifically. Everyone's kind of mentioned, if a student just has one allergy to one particular product, that destination station is just one spot, but there are so many other things within the operation that are safe for them to eat, and having that relationship and that one-on-one communication with that student is what really helps open up a lot of those doorways and pathways for that student, and brings, I think, a much higher level of comfort both for the student and for the staff that's serving that student.
Yeah, absolutely. I think pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, communication is key. Between the student, the parent, the dining hall staff, all the parties involved. So that definitely can't be emphasized enough. Thank you for that. You did bring up training, additional training, or additional cleaning practices. Every 30 minutes, you're going to be cleaning things in order to kind of slow the spread of the virus, or stop the spread, hopefully. And then you mentioned allergen training for your staff. Is there going to be any additional training specifically during the welcome back time on your campus, or these are just ongoing, already in place procedures? We
do have specific training for what has changed in relationship to COVID. So what things are going to be different this fall. Because we want to make sure that everyone is 100% on board, understands the new safety expectations, the new cleaning expectations, how those are going to be implemented, who's responsible for making sure those are followed through on. The allergen training is something that we do every year as part of back to school, or every semester as part of the back to school, brush up training process. So those have been in place for several years now, and those will continue just as they normally would, but we have added on an additional layer of training that specifically addresses the adjustments and changes for COVID.
Okay, that's great. I know that we got a couple of questions about that. Terry, we haven't heard from you in a little while. Are you planning on implementing any additional training as it relates to COVID and/or food allergies, because operations will be slightly different this year?
Well, I would echo what Laura said. We already do, as part of our natural training process, we train in pre-opening for every fall and every spring. So there will be some additional information about, like Laura said, about cleaning and other aspects that may have changed it within the account. The other thing that we tend to do with training is also make sure that in pre-service meetings, there's resources for the managers to continue to have the conversation about food allergies on a regular basis, that it's always kind of bringing it back to top of mind, and that will continue as well.
That's great. Yeah, having ongoing touch points with the management staff who can filter it down to food service workers, frontline workers is definitely a great way to spread the information. Gina, we had a question from a couple participants. For top 8 free stations, how can we manage additional allergens if they're outside the top 8 or 9? So their example was chicken or turkey, or what if it's something like pineapple? How do you manage that?
You said Gina, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
Don't actually have a top 8 allergen station at Ohio State. We have a station that is free of gluten and nuts, so tree nuts and peanuts. So I can't necessarily, but I'll answer it based on, I do get that question a lot. I have students come to me or parents and they say, my child is nut free, but they don't want gluten-free food necessarily. So can they eat beyond that station? And yes, they absolutely can. When I meet with students and parents, I always say to them, they just have to declare their allergy, and then the steps will be taken in the back of the house to make sure that their meal is safe no matter what. So the student is to make sure that the food that they ordered is actually safe for them by looking on our website. All of our ingredients are on there. Place their order, indicate their allergen, and then the steps will be taken to avoid cross contact with nuts or whatever the allergen is.
Okay.
Our station is also plant forward, so a lot of vegetarian products, not a whole lot of meat, and so we get that feedback too. I'm gluten free, but I like meat, so what do I do? We do offer a small amount of meat, but then you can also get, your burger on a gluten free bun at another station. Yeah, we very much, I think we do a really good job of accommodating that. But that's at our traditions, all you care to eat. And I will say things are a little bit different this year, similar to what a lot of the other panelists have said. We're not going to have the all you care to eat option anymore. We all, again, order from Grubhub, and you really only get to choose one station to order from. But within all those stations, there's going to be the option to order your allergen-free meal at just about every single one of those stations, no matter which allergen you have, generally speaking.
Got it. Okay, so let's throw that question over to Tina, because you did mention the Simple Servings destination station. How do you handle allergies that are outside the top 8 or 9?
Well, actually, I was just typing an answer to Miss Oliver, who asked a question about what to do when, when should they contact the manager? At what point in the whole acceptance process? And so it goes along with that. Anyone who has an allergy, and we have people that have allergens all over the spectrum, we encourage, once you're accepted into the school, call that food service director, call that general manager, get to know that staff. And I think I heard Laura talking a little bit about this. Get to know the staff, the managers that are there all the time, because they will move heaven and earth to accommodate whatever your needs are. We have some sites where the chef actually makes customized meals for like 8 or 9 people because they have such intense allergies to multiple allergens that aren't on the normal spectrum. And so that's how we typically handle allergens or allergies to food that aren't incorporated into Simple Servings. And then we also have My Zone, which is a smaller offer that doesn't exclude so many of the top allergens. So it's gluten and nuts and peanuts. And then in some locations, we actually include dairy in that. And so, and some places, and that, again, that offer is tiered. So it's different at different locations. It could be behind a locked door that only certain students have key access to. So there are multiple offers across different locations, but so we customize meals for students, and I would suggest that as soon as you find out that you're accepted to a school, contact those managers, because they will do whatever they can to keep the students safe and happy and inclusive, and be able to eat in an inclusive environment with everyone else. Yeah, no, of course. I think the sooner that you can reach out to the school, as soon as you know, the more they can start putting plans in place for you. Absolutely. Jill, we got a question since you brought up the text ordering ahead of time. I believe that was you. For if a note comes through that someone has a food allergy, will that meal be prepared in
a specific location in order to reduce cross-contact risk and then brought to the pickup site or then delivered to the student? Or are there plans in place to prepare specific meals when you know ahead of time that someone has an allergy?
So with the text ahead, we've got a previous relationship. They've reached out to us, disclosed, what their dietary restrictions are. And so because of that, we already kind of have a plan in place, especially for those with, multiple dietary restrictions, especially outside your top 8. Hey, here's the list for, this student of what we can use to make their food items. And then we have allergen kits that the person who's in charge of making their meal will use. And so it's freshly sanitized, decontaminated, kept away separate from everything else to use to make that specific person's options. And say, they need a, some marinara sauce for whatever item that they're making. They'll go ahead and use a fresh can. So that way there's to minimize that chance of cross contact. And then for some of our grab and go options for the ones that we make in-house. So if, we've got a True Balance station, then we'll go ahead and make all of those food options there because it's essentially a self-contained station all the way from, having its own storage to its own cleaning and everything in between. So it could be essentially its own dining hall within the dining hall. So that really cuts down on that cross contact of that grab and go option as well.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the destination stations sort of have their own kitchen, they have their own prep table, they have their own refrigerator, they have their own stove, ovens, all that kind of stuff. But when things are more centrally prepared because operations may not be fully open, then there's always a risk of cross contact when you're preparing something in a commercial kitchen. So we definitely got a lot of questions about that. I'm just trying to read a couple of questions that we had come in here. I'm going to open this up to the group if anyone can answer this, but back in May, the CDC issued temporary guidance that allowed for relaxed labeling laws due to disruptions in supply chain. I believe, Terry, you mentioned the disruptions in supply chain. I think you mentioned that first, or maybe it was Tina. Do you guys anticipate any disruptions in suppliers if you haven't already touched on that? And if so, how will you handle that to ensure that there are safe products for your students? Anyone want to take that one? Okay, Laura.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. I think the best answer is we're watching it very, very closely. There have been a few hiccups, and I'm sure that, just the general community has seen some of the ways that COVID has impacted meatpacking plants, for example, and, some of the impacts that just the public has experienced. So we've been watching and monitoring all of that very closely. I think we've been extremely fortunate that our supply chain has remained relatively intact. We're actually having a few more issues in other areas than in food related at the moment. So, just things like PPE and things of that nature, where initially we had some real struggles trying to get what we needed from that perspective. And that is now leveling out. So I think there's, a lot of grace there just in terms of when school is starting back, a lot of the hiccups have already been figured out from that perspective. So we're watching all of that very closely. If I understand the crux of the question, though, it really comes down to the labeling laws being relaxed and potentially things changing and what we might see on labels. And it's my understanding that anything that could potentially affect health is not allowed to be that relaxed. So, for example, if they swapped out romaine lettuce for spinach, that is not necessarily going to have an impact on someone's health as if they switched out, I don't know, peas for peanuts, as an example, right? That could have a significant impact on someone's health. So I think that from a top 8 allergen perspective, I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I feel fairly confident that food manufacturers are not going to risk putting a top 8 allergen product into something that they're going to put on the shelves and risk, making someone ill and not having that ingredient declared. I think where it could potentially get a little bit, more gray is when it comes to those things that are not considered a top 8 allergen, and those are where we'll want to have to be much more cautious and specific. But again, we're watching it incredibly closely, and we'll mitigate and change paths and adapt however we need to. I think going back to the philosophy of just using whole ingredients, especially at those destination stations, it provides a much higher level of comfort for everybody, regardless of whether you just have one allergy or 15. You know exactly what's in that food. There's really not much question about it. So I know from our perspective, that's a huge comfort. So no matter what else happens, we know what's in that food.
Sure. And if a student had a question on an item that was served, whether it was hot on the line, put into a box and then they take out, or prepackaged in a cooler that they can take out, are the ingredients available online? Are they available on a packaged item? Will they be available both? How can the student that doesn't have one of the top 8 allergies, or even with the top 8 allergy, let's include all allergies here.
Mm-hmm.
How can the student check to see if the item that they're picking up has something that they can't have?
Yeah. So we have a few different approaches because it varies from one campus to another. We do have some campuses that label all of the micro ingredients on everything, and they can find that information generally online or on some kind of a product identifier in the operation. For packaged foods, there is some variance and a little bit of relaxation in some of the labeling just because of COVID. But what we have done to mitigate that is to make sure that those allergen-specific meals are really clearly identified. So we're doing, everything that we can to make sure that those allergies are called out on things that we might be preparing in-house. And then we also use some commissary type solutions for some prepackaged things. We do have some locations that are opening school with a 2-week quarantine and lockdown. And so all of the meals that students are being provided are having to be prepackaged. All of those do have complete and nutrition information, complete ingredient information, and then students who need that allergen accommodation are able to pre-order that specific meal that they need to accommodate their allergy. And again, all of that detailed ingredient information is provided.
And Gina, you mentioned Grubhub, and Tina, you mentioned, it's escaping me, something Bites?
Yeah, Bite Plus.
Bite Plus, yeah, I knew it was Bites. When you're ordering online, can you see the full list of ingredients through the app?
No, you can't see the full list of ingredients.
Okay.
But you can see if there's an allergen.
One of the top 8. It would
Right.
say contains wheat, milk. Okay. And what about Grubhub? How is that platform?
Yeah, so on Grubhub, we're working on getting icons on Grubhub. So the icons that we use at Ohio State are dairy, gluten, and nuts. And once we get those on Grubhub, that will be helpful. But of course, there's other allergens, as we all know. All of that information can be found on our website. So we're going to have a link to our Net Nutrition website and dining services within the Grubhub app. So it's not directly on the app, but they can get to it from the app to find all the information of all the items that we serve.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I'm sure they would like to know immediately, like as soon as they're ordering something, whether or not they can have something. So that's good.
Yeah.
Terry, we got a question from Gail. On your campuses, do you use student workers in the kitchens or all of those preparing and packaging food professionals? If you use student workers in the kitchen, do you feel this is a weak link in your safety systems?
We do use student workers, as most campuses do. It's a relationship that we value on our campuses. and student workers are oftentimes ones that help us problem solve, or they come to us with new ideas. It does create a challenge in some cases, because we do want to still make sure that those students receive the same training. So we do make efforts to, before that student is put out into the service area, that they are trained, and that a student worker would not be working on any of our allergen concepts such as Oasis without receiving training. So we think it's a valuable relationship, and brings us lots of good ideas. But training can be a challenge. We just have to stop and make sure that that worker gets trained just like any other worker would.
Yeah, of course. I can open this up to the group too, because I think we may get a couple of different answers to this. But if we have students coming back to campus and they are forced to quarantine for the 14 days, how do you ensure the ability to get meals to those students? Anyone want to take that?
Tiffany, I can take that one.
Okay.
So we are actually using our Bite Plus app, and the students who are quarantined, and I will tell you that it depends on the university and what they're doing with their quarantining. Some places have suites, so if one person in that suite becomes ill, the entire suite has to quarantine, and I know that's the case at several locations. But then there's other universities that have an entire building, so that student will be moved to a building and they'll be there. So we will be able to, we have a whole process in place, and there's multiple processes, as some of the folks I'm sure on the call have multiple processes for the types of models that each school has. We will order online, and it will be delivered. I'll give you an example in one place. We deliver it to the door. We text the student to let them know that their meal's there. It goes in a little box right outside the door, and then they can pick up their food from there. And they know it's immediately there, and they can pull it into their suite.
Okay. I know that's a concern going back. Quarantine, you're kind of forced to stay in one place, and how are you going to get food?
Yeah.
So anyone else have any other creative solutions?
At Ohio State, we're doing something very similar. We're not involving the app though that I'm aware of. We do have a group of full-time, mostly managers, who have been chosen to kind of be the delivery group for anyone who's under quarantine or in isolation. So I'm going to be part of that. And so what will happen is we'll find out if any of the students have an allergy, and if they do, what they are, what those allergies are, or whatever it is that they're trying to avoid. And we'll make sure that when we prepare their food, that it's free of that allergen or the ingredient. And then just like what Tina said, we will also be dropping it off at their door and not going inside. So very similar.
Okay. We got a question, Jill. I can see if you can field this one, since you oversee a couple schools down in Texas. But do you think that food operations are going to be reduced this year due to the need to do more takeout meals? Just your overall volume of food?
I think there will be a simplification of a lot of menus. So that's going to help with a lot of lines. So that way you have that kind of less backup. So I do see menus being applied for that. And then we talked about supply chain earlier as well. So say, there's a certain item that can't be in currently, we'll change to a different recipe. And that's a great thing about having kind of standardized recipes across the board is, hey, this ingredient didn't come in, but we've got the rest of them. Here's a similar recipe that we can kind of switch to.
Did she freeze? Okay, well, I don't know if she's frozen or not. But we can go on to another question. Terry, we got a question about monitoring crowd size. Most states are limiting indoor dining, but what happens when it starts to get colder? If and when dining opens up, will dining allow students to make reservations to eat in for special situations? Or will it still be more of a takeout model?
I think it's a good question, and it's an evolving model depending on what happens with the virus levels by geography as well as by schools. So I think that we're just preparing to be able to pivot and make adjustments as the semester goes on. Some of our campuses are opening and allowing some seated dining at reduced capacity. Others are going takeout only. There are some places that are opening other areas of campus where students can pick up food and then go have a place to sit somewhere else. So there's solutions that are happening, that we would have never ever thought about before. There's also the aspect of kind of pop-up dining that had been really popular prior to COVID, just in terms of keeping things fresh and exciting. But now it's becoming a way that kind of disperse people into different locations. So being able to kind of have separate setups for service to give places that aren't normally the traditional dining halls, make them a place where people can grab their food and get something very quickly without coming in contact with as many people. The weather's going to be interesting. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on that. I was going
to ask Gina in Ohio. I know Jill's in Texas. Any ideas on what winter will look like? I know right now in DC it's 97 degrees today, so I can't even think about it being cold. But once indoor dining is a must, what are things looking like?
So it's a good question, and I really don't. I know what the plan is. I'm not sure how it's going to actually be executed. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we'll do a great job. But, yes, it does get very cold in Ohio. It also gets super hot, like right now. Yeah. Our plan is for students not to go into the operations until they get notified that their food is ready. And, in theory, that sounds easy enough. And we will actually have full-time staff, whether they're students or our full-time staff, who help to reduce physical increase physical distancing. So reduce, keep people distant.
Maintain social distance.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. We say physical distancing. So I need to get that right. We're maintaining physical distance. So we will have people who at each operation that are going to help with that. I feel like most of the residence halls are close to at least one or two food service operations. So most students are going to be able to wait in their dorm or their residence hall, place their order, wait till they get the notification that their order is ready, and then go pick it up and then go right back to their dorm and eat, or somewhere else where they can sit and enjoy a warm meal. I mean, Ohio State is huge. There's libraries, there's plenty of spaces to go and find a place to sit and eat. I went there for graduate school. I didn't even go there for undergraduate. I can think of, plenty of places on the top of my head. You can just go and eat and sit by yourself or with a friend. So I think it'll be okay, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a hurdle that we're just going to have to get over, but we do have a plan in place. We'll just see how it goes.
Okay. If food service operations are anything, they are adaptable, I think. And I think that's just the name of the game here, just being able to pivot in different directions so that we can accommodate everyone and feed students safely. We got a question about robot delivery systems. Does anyone use robots on their campus to deliver foods? I know one or two schools, maybe George Mason may be using them, but anyone else here have any schools that use robots?
We had one that started just before COVID hit, and the whole program got pulled because of COVID because we weren't quite sure how to safely manage it. So it's on pause for the time being.
Okay, yeah, that was their question. How do robot delivery systems work if there are multiple deliveries in one packet? How do you ensure that something doesn't run into another package of food? I would think that, and I don't have no experience with robots, but I would think if it was an item with a purple sticker on it, as Gina mentioned, to signify allergies, then hopefully they would only be putting that specialty item or that special meal in the robot at a time. But it would be definitely something that I would ask your food service provider just to clarify before ordering through the robots.
Tiffany,
Yes.
I can tell you that at George Mason,
Yeah.
it's only one. The robots, we have multiple robots all over campus. They're
Yes.
roaming out all over.
Yeah.
They only deliver one at a time.
Okay. Yeah, they were testing them in downtown DC, so I saw them a couple years ago on the streets in DuPont.
Yeah.
And I knew that they had made their way over to Mason, so it's just very interesting. That's great. Okay, so switching gears, we got a couple questions about stock epinephrine. Does anyone have? Let me just read this one. Are you aware of any schools that you work with who keep stock epinephrine in dining halls? Does anyone want to field that one? Yes, Terry?
Yes, I can take that one, at least from our perspective. So we have had several clients who have installed stock epinephrine stations within the dining halls. And the way that we approach that is that we, as the food experts, don't usually manage that. But we certainly, if it is in close proximity of the dining halls, our teams will train along with the university staff in order to know how to utilize that equipment. So in the cases where the university is installing and maintaining the equipment, that's the way we've approached it.
Okay. And so they're maintaining the equipment, but is there any training for dining hall staff if in an emergency?
Yeah, our managers would participate in the training that the university provided.
Okay.
We would go side by side with their team.
Okay. Does anyone else have schools that have stock epinephrine? I'm not sure there's many, unfortunately. Yeah, we got a couple questions.
It's only a couple that have gone that route so far. But in those cases, that's our approach.
Yeah. Just definitely important to reinforce with students that you're working with to make sure that they're carrying their epinephrine with them at all times. And just being sure that your dining hall staff knows the correct number to call. And 911 is the obvious choice, but sometimes there's a local campus police or a local EMS that may be quicker and faster because they know the campus better. So it's always important to kind of know that information as well. Okay, who haven't we heard from in a little while? Tina, you want to answer this one? We got this question from Teresa. When you need to switch recipes, will they be reviewed for allergens and will websites be updated?
Absolutely is the easiest way to answer that.
Okay, great.
Yes. We have a lengthy process when it comes to recipes and ingredients that go into those recipes. And of course, all of the icons that designate what type of allergens are in those recipes. So you will never see a recipe that hasn't been thoroughly vetted, tested, put through our systems, and coded correctly. So
that's great news. I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to hear that. Who else haven't we heard from a little while? Jill? We got a question about accommodations on campus. Are there any specific housing and dining accommodations that you suggest for students with food allergies to ask ahead of time? Now, I think would be the great time to do it to ensure adequate access to food given this new situation. Yes, no, is she frozen again?
Is that for me?
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
No worries. Sorry, I've been having a little bit of internet connection. So yeah, if someone has a dietary restriction, reaching out to those food service managers first off, or if they have a registered dietitian on staff will really, really help. So that way we can kind of get those talks going to make sure that everybody has the resources that they need. Can you repeat the second half of that question?
Let me see if I can find it again. Hold on. We just wanted to make,
Sorry.
we just had parents and students that were asking what accommodations that they should ask for ahead of time, and if there's anything specific to COVID that they should be asking for.
Not necessarily related to COVID. It's just kind of in general, you know, making sure that you let the university know. A lot of universities will also require some physician documentation of those allergens and going through disability services as well. And that's really important just to make sure that, you know, if you're going to be in a shared dorm room, that, you know, you've got the disabilities can make sure that your roommate is aware of that, you know, food allergy, or maybe they pair someone with a similar food allergy with you and stuff like that, just for protection. And then just constant communication if there are any issues, you know, maybe the menus are simplified during COVID and someone's running into an issue, you know, just talk with those food service managers and that dietitian to make sure, you know, to voice your concerns, voice any issues that may be arising, because this is kind of a new process. But as far as kind of disclosing allergens and making sure that the university knows, there's not necessarily any COVID specific things that I really see coming into play so far.
Sure. Yeah, we got some questions about other campus operations such as Greek life, restrictions on things that people can bring into dorms, if there has to be like an early exit, if there can be appliances allowed in dorms. And all of those questions are great questions. Obviously, we're focusing more on primary campus dining during this webinar, but it's definitely, as Jill said, just part of this conversation as you get closer to school. Things that may be in place now may be different in August. A lot can change over the next month. So communication is key. I've said it before and I'll say it again. All right, we're gonna go around the panel right now. I think it's time to talk about a success story. Is there anything that you want to share from the past that may help our listeners? And we can go in the same order as before, but Terry, do you want to start maybe something that you had trialed with a student or a group of students and have now expanded it to the larger group?
Yeah, so I think one of our biggest success stories has been the implementation of the OASIS stations that gave students that starting point where they always kind of knew that that was the place that they could come. And we put it in on several, new campuses that, had previously been challenged, where students were very dissatisfied with what their options were. And one of the twists that we've tried to keep it consistent with the OASIS station is to make sure that the staff at that station is maybe a little, certainly they're trained in food allergy awareness, but maybe they're a little bit more, they have a little bit more expertise in it. So they almost become a concierge to the rest of the cafe. And so to speak to what everybody else has said here, that they can kind of then be the conduit to the other choices within the cafe that might be available to students that have fewer restrictions than that station. And it's been really well received. Is to have a go-to place where students know this is my starting point.
And at that station and at other stations across campus, you're labeling all the micro ingredients and the top 8 allergens, or how do you convey that information to your campuses?
We work through descriptive menuing and restaurant style descriptors to give students really, again, the starting point for what is in that food. In our food system, on a typical campus, we are working with a couple of thousand ingredients on any given campus. Some of those naturally, allergen-free ingredients, and others are, really high-risk ingredients that, we don't get notification from manufacturers when something changes. And so we want to give the students enough information as a starting point, but we also really, really emphasize we want to give them real-time information, day of, meal of, because we want to make sure that something hasn't changed in a product. When you're dealing with that many products in a kitchen that can be combined in, thousands of different combinations, or may have changed from the manufacturer, you don't want to risk that by just putting it out on a sign and then have students not ask questions.
Sure.
So that's our approach.
Sure. So your staff is trained to be able to help the student navigate through different ingredients. If they're asking at point of sale or point of service, they can help provide the expanded ingredient list to that student.
We always have a trained chef or manager on the floor to answer those questions. And to expedite this year, a lot of our accounts are putting in kind of an at your service or just ask like area of the cafe where someone is going to be stationed throughout the whole meal, not only to answer questions about allergens and ingredients, but also any questions students have about the mobile ordering apps, or if they have questions about where they can go to eat if they can't sit in the dining hall. It'll be kind of a one-stop shop, because we don't want students wandering around, particularly this year, trying to find somebody to answer a question for them.
Yeah, sure. I had a question that came in earlier today, but what should students do if they get rude answers, whether it's asking to change their gloves or asking dining staff about ingredients to determine what foods are safe for them? Who can students turn to when dining staff is resistant to changing to safer allergen practices?
Tiffany, I couldn't hear the end of that question. You broke up a little bit for me.
Sorry. Who can students turn to if they're having issues with dining staff or if they're resistant to changing to safe allergy practices?
Yeah, I mean, our chefs and managers are the ones to turn to in the moment. But then, just like, they might communicate with us early on before they get to campus, those one-on-one meetings can be held at any point during the year where a student needs something to be shifted or changed for them. Just because we start off with one plan doesn't mean that's the plan that will work in a month from now.
Yeah.
So we would encourage them to, recontact us. And I'm always available. Depending on the campus, we might have a campus dietitian. So you can always contact me through our dining websites. If they do put in a question through Ask the Expert, it actually comes directly to me, and then I can disperse it out, or I will manage it myself, depending on what location it's for.
Great. And one last thing, and I'll ask everyone this too. Any advice that you can give to students coming to campus this fall? Terry, do you want to just wrap that up?
Yeah, sorry. Reach out now. Do not wait another second.
Okay,
if you haven't already been in contact with somebody, do it today. Because we want to get started with the planning with you.
Yeah, I would echo that too. Gina, you want to give us a success story and then any advice for someone coming in the fall?
Sure. Like I said, I've been here for, it'll be 7 years in August, and just the growth that I've seen in our employees, we don't have a very high turnover rate, which I'm proud to say. We have a lot of unit chefs who have been with us for a long time, but I've seen some, take on the responsibility, or, maybe get promoted from line cook to unit chef. And, at first it can be really overwhelming, all the information they have to know about food allergies. Not to say they didn't know it before, because they've always worked around food, but coming to a college campus, it's definitely in your face more, because it needs to be, it has to be. We have a whole program for it, which they might not have had wherever they worked prior, at a restaurant or wherever it was. And just the relationships that I've seen between unit chefs, managers, assistant chefs, and students, I think is a success story in itself. I mean, I can think of 10 off the top of my head, and students who will reach out at the end of the school year and just really reach out to me. And of course I forward it to the unit chef. It's not me, it's them. They're doing all the work. I'm just kind of the liaison, right? So I love that. And then I also think, I would say a good success story for us at Ohio State is, I just think about how lucky we are that we've already launched Grubhub, and that we've already been gotten so used to that app, and the students are so used to it as well. And we started adding icons, like I said, to the Grubhub system or portal last year. again, they're on the kiosk. So when students are ordering off the kiosk, you can see the icons, but unfortunately they haven't yet been made available on the mobile ordering app, but it's coming. But just the fact that we're already 10 steps ahead for this online ordering system that we're going to have to go to this year, I think is a huge success story, because we would have had to go from having nothing to 100% of your orders are going to be online and ordered ahead of time. I don't know how we would have survived. So I think that's a huge success story as well.
Yeah, it's great to already have those systems in place as we move into the fall semester, when we'll be an expanded version of what you were doing in January and February. Any advice for someone incoming student in the fall or someone returning?
Yeah, I think I echo what Terry said. Reach out now. It's funny. I don't know how everyone else is here, but I feel like I've gotten more emails. I don't know if it's because students are finally making their decision about school, and that could be, maybe making it a little bit later because things are just crazy right now. I haven't even figured out where my daughter's going to kindergarten, so I can imagine what it's like to make a college choice. But I've got probably 20 emails just in the past 2 weeks, which would never happen in the past. Usually they're all reaching out to me in May, June, at the latest July. Here it is July 28th, and I'm still getting emails. So it's totally fine. They'll be fine. But definitely reach out, because the more you know, the better off you're going to be in the fall. And I also want to say, I can't, and I wonder if the other panelists agree with this, but I oftentimes will get on the phone with parents, usually parents who are just kind of really scared about their son or daughter coming to school in the fall. And I would say almost 100% of the time, I never hear from them again. And I think that's a good thing. I think to me, that means they were scared and nervous at first, but everything ended up being just fine.
Yeah.
Parents, and the student, I hope I never hear from you again in the school.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I tell them to reach out if they have questions, but I hope I don't hear anything from you. But if you have a problem, I will give you my phone number. I'll give them anything. But generally, I don't hear anything. And I think that's because they're finding that it's a lot easier than they thought it would be. And their anxieties are hopefully out the window.
Yeah.
And I feel like we do a really good job with helping those students at Ohio State. And I've been to plenty of other universities, and I think a lot of them are doing great. So for parents out there who are nervous, hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. It's nice to know that they can reach out ahead of time, and that everyone, you are open to that and expect that and hope for that. So
yes, definitely.
That's great.
Because I think someone else said that, maybe it was a panelist or an attendee who said that something about their son or daughter being nervous to even say anything, or didn't want to say anything. But the most important thing is to have a student or, a daughter or son who will actually speak up and say things. Those are the ones who are going to be the most successful, because especially when you're on a college campus, you have to voice your opinion, your feedback. You're not being a nuisance, you're just being human. And we want to build on our program. We're only going to get better if we hear from you as a student. So
yeah, no, of course. Tina, any success story that you'd like to share, and advice for a student coming in the fall?
Sure. And just to tag on what Gina was saying, right on. Yep. If we hear from a parent, great, but hopefully we don't hear from you again, because that means we're doing something right. And like she said, and I'm doing advice backwards, sorry.
Okay.
The single very most important thing that a student can do, or a parent can do, even before you get accepted, is contact those food service managers, the director, whatever their title is. Contact that group, talk to them, find out what is the extent that they can accommodate. Because to be honest with you, not all schools have the same level of ability to accommodate. That's just reality. And some have just an enormous amount. They, like I said, they do custom meals for a number of students. But how do they get those custom meals? They speak up. They come and they find the RD, and they find the executive chef, and they find the manager, and they say, this is my name, this is what I've got going on.
Yeah.
How can you help me? You make an appointment, you sit down, RRDs will talk to you with the chef, and they come up with a whole plan. So absolutely, you're not a problem. We can't help you if we don't know. That's usually the crux. We can't help you if we just don't know.
Sure. Sure.
And a success story, it's kind of a trickle down to start out with. Everybody knows there are people out there that believe food allergies are made up. Okay, everybody on this call knows that's not true. But there are people out there that just think, oh, you just want attention. Oh, it's no big deal. And we have an extensive training program for frontline managers, supervisors, hourly. Everyone is trained, and it's amazing to me to see how one manager will go from a location to another location, get promoted within our organization, that you can move around. And once they get trained, you see those light bulbs go off. And when someone else comes in that thinks, oh, it's not that big of a deal, the entire staff will immediately squelch that naysayer. And it's really, really just gratifying to see that all of that training did pay off. And to give you an example, and I'm going to give a shout out to one of my RDs, Sue Hurd. She received a glowing letter from a student that basically said, I was so nervous when I came to school. I didn't think anybody could help me. I thought I'd never be able to eat. And she was so worried, very filled with anxiety. And the chef, the manager, Sue, all sat down, and this is just a one-off, but she wrote this beautiful letter saying, thank you so much. You made my college experience so much better because you did this. And we do this all the time. And most managers and RDs across the country, it doesn't matter what food service company or organization, if you're self-op, like at Ohio State, I'm quite sure that they sit down with these students, and the students are so nervous when they come in, but as a result of that individual attention, they realize, wow, I can eat safely and I can eat inclusively. And it's nice to know that all of that training really did pay off. And as a result, we had this student provide this fantastic letter of, recommendation, accommodation, if you will, for that whole university staff, and how they really made her college experience what she always wanted and what she was afraid she'd never have. So
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I'm happy to hear that success story.
Yeah.
Laura, would you like to share a success story and then some advice for incoming students or returning students in the fall?
Yeah. So I think in terms of success stories, just piggybacking on some of the recommendations, in terms of getting students to communicate with us, we implemented a program called Don't Be Shy, Self-Identify a couple of years ago. It's not necessarily in place at all of our campuses, but the idea is that students can go onto their dining website and register, just self-disclose that they have a food allergy. It automatically sends a notification to the members of the management team who are on that kind of listserv. So our chef, our lead manager, the student can share as much or as little information as they feel comfortable with, and then that initiates for our team to reach out to the student. So it takes a little bit of the pressure off of the student trying to go figure out who am I supposed to go talk to. It just automatically generates that report. And then secondarily to that, once a student does that, they get, I'm so not a techie person, but how on your iPhone, your boarding pass will go into your little pass book or whatever. So it'll generate something like that so that when a student is walking around campus and they get close to one of the dining operations, it'll ping up a little message on their phone. Hey, don't forget to remind us about your food allergies today, something along those lines. So it just really helps encourage students to speak up and be an advocate for themselves, which is what my advice would be for incoming students is be that advocate for yourself. Make sure that regardless of whether you think your dining services provider is accommodating you well enough or not, register with that Office of Student Disability Services. You know, your food allergy is not a condition on being accepted or anything that has anything to do with, you know, whether or not you're granted entry to the university. And most of them don't record any of that kind of information whatsoever, but it becomes so critical once you're actually living on campus and interacting, because it's not just a dining services issue, right? If you've got a severe food allergy, you got to have a plan for everywhere you are physically on that campus. So just making sure that you're registered with that Office of Student Disability Services, I think just really helps tie it all together.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The more people on campus that know, the better. I agree, because dining is just one part of the accommodations process. You're all over campus, so we just want to make sure that you're safe across campus. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. All right, Jill, last but not least, would you like to share a success story and then any advice for students coming in the fall?
Absolutely. So I had a student a while back and they came to me, they had probably, it was like a list of about 32 different allergens. And they hadn't told anybody, and they were essentially just eating a couple items from the salad bar, and had started having some pretty severe health conditions because of, you know, limiting everything. And once they spoke up, reached out, we made a plan for them. And at that point, it was in the middle of the semester. They just failed some of their midterms. We started, you know, helping them find foods that they could eat. And they were able to turn around and start doing better on their tests and really thrive. And, you know, I saw them the next school year, you know, across campus, and they kind of yell at me, "Hey, Jill." And, you know, they were doing fantastic, didn't have any issues, but it came from that kind of initial communication. So, I mean, I'm sure everybody has stories like that, but, you know, it just kind of, it makes you smile, that, you know, that you can really make a difference. And it affects, you know, there's so much other stuff to worry about when you're a college student. You don't want them to have about food too. So to make that possible is just really nice. And then, you know, even, yeah, as far as just kind of going off of everybody else, you know, communicate early and often, you know, make sure that you're utilizing the resources that are available on each campus. Don't wait, you know, until October to reach out to ask, you know, when you're already struggling, reach out before the semester starts. Because if we don't hear from you, we don't know, and we're assuming everything is going fantastic.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I'm gonna end it with this. We got a comment from Joel. It looks like campus food service providers are doing a great job preparing for the new year. Dealing with food allergies is one major challenge, but adding in a pandemic, this adds additional stress. And being at college is stressful in and of itself, if I may add. I feel very confident that the students will be taken care of at a high level. There was a lot of great ideas and plans presented here today. Congratulations and great job. So I will echo what he said. I think there's a lot of good ideas that you guys shared with us today. And if it's one thing that we've learned is that we need the students to communicate. The sooner that you know, the sooner you can start accommodating them. I think communication is key. But as it relates to COVID, I think there are plans in place to help minimize the spread of the virus while keeping students safe with food allergies. So thank you guys for joining today, and for all the attendees, thank you. And as I mentioned, it was being recorded and it will be available next week. So hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.